doesn't always start with sirens and sparks. Sometimes it starts with a binder on a kitchen table and a decision that never gets undone. From that point on, I wasn't bracing for what she would do next. I was documenting it. Every lie she spread, every stunt she pulled, every line she crossed became another piece of evidence she was building against herself. She just didn't know yet that the fight had already shifted, and that she was already losing it. After the realization of the piling evidence, the quiet didn't feel like quiet. It felt like a held breath, the kind that burns your ribs if you hold it too long. Morning still came on schedule. Dew silvered the paddocks. Guardian trotted the fence line with a soldier's seriousness. Rhonda clicked the aisle lights on. Brooke hummed the same soft tune she hums when she stacks hay. The land pretended nothing had happened. I pretended too, until the pretending felt like a lie I was telling myself. Peace lived here first. Now it lived here with a flinch. I was mucking the last stall when I heard tires on gravel slow, performative. A silver Escalade eased to a stop, sunlight sliding along its immaculate paint. Karen Livingston stepped out like a realtor meeting a camera crew. She marched up the driveway like she already owned the ground she was trespassing on. She climbed the porch steps and, without being invited, started pushing a thick manila envelope into my hands. "Vista Hills HOA governance packet," she chirped. "Guidelines, architectural palette, pool hours, quiet times, and your membership form." She smiled at my barn like it was a clubhouse she could rent out by the hour. Also, some dates we're considering for a pond area gala. Very tasteful. I set my coffee on the side table so it clicked. "This isn't a petting zoo with a public pool," I said. "And that lake isn't anyone's venue. It's a part of this private property." Karen's smile got sharper at the corners. "We'll see about that," she said. "You'll be hearing from the board shortly regarding pool hours, quiet times, and the gala booking times." I watched her drive off in a cloud of dust, and then slid the envelope into a file I'd already named in black Sharpie. HOA Land Grab Campaign. Then I went practical. I posted signs like stitches in a wound I refused to let spread. Private property, non-H, OA land, no trespassing. One every 50 feet along the main approach, another line along the lake trailhead. If anyone pretended not to see them, a deputy could not. Next, Ted called Lionel Marshall. He'd served in my dad's platoon with Ted and Frank during the Desert Storm War in Kuwait, and he now ran a geometric land surveying outfit with hands that knew how to measure with truth. "Lionel, it's Ted Redding, Charlene Hayle's godfather." "Well, I'll be," he said, the smile in his voice immediate. "Haven't heard that name since we were all together back in the war." And then, when her dad and I got rained out at his cross-country field, and he swore thunder meant the barn was simply saying grace. Ted told him what was happening. He was here at daybreak the next morning, with gear that looked like a moon landing GPS receivers, theodolites, 3D laser scanners, a 4K drone for aerials. He ran lines from corner to corner, cross-checked legal descriptions to physical pins, and flagged each corner in bright survey tape like earrings the land had decided to wear. The drone purred, mapping every paddock, lane, and tree line. By dusk, Lionel slid a stamped, signed report into Ted's hands. "You're outside Vista Hills by a country mile," he said. "Always have been. Just as I thought," he murmured, and shook Lionel's hand. "Thank you." Later on that day, Ted and I drove straight to the county land registry. Debbie, who has helped my family survive more paper storms than any weatherman predicted, peered over her glasses when I asked her to check filings against my parcel. Her eyebrows climbed. She turned the monitor so Ted and I could see. Pending annexation, Vista Hills, my parcel number, my name, a signature that was supposed to be mine but wasn't. "Nope," I said. Debbie's fingers flew. "Want me to lock it?" "Flag it, lock it, put a seatbelt on it," I said. "If anyone shows up waving any papers around, you call me and then you get on the horn and call the sheriff." She stamped my plat map and slid it across. "Red flag attached. Nothing slides through while we review. And Charlene?" She tipped her head toward the window where the afternoon light turned her hair the color of old wheat. "Don't let them chase you off your own land." "Never have," I said. "Never will." 3 days later, a silhouette I knew by now. The silver Escalade rolled up the drive again, crunching on gravel. This time followed by a white SUV with 2 men in navy polos who wore their clipboards like holsters. Karen fluffed her hair and marched to the porch, like she owned the air around her. In her hand, she held papers in a plastic sleeve. "Notice of eviction," she chirped. "Pending a board vote." Guardian had already moved between us, a low river of fur and muscle. I read the first line and felt the laugh start low. "From my own property, for which you have zero control over?" I said, stifling a chuckle. "That's really bold, even for you." The men shifted like we'd surprised them by existing. Karen shrugged one elegant shoulder. "We're simply enforcing community cohesion." "Fine. Then I'm simply calling the sheriff." I then picked up my phone and called Kyle Whitmore. The sheriff pulled in 10 minutes later, dust bowing politely around his cruiser. He stepped out of his cruiser, tipped his hat, read my signs, and took the plastic sleeve from Karen's hand. He scanned the first page, flipped to the second, and made the face all lawmen make when someone has just wasted their entire morning. "These," he said, holding the papers between 2 fingers like a used tissue, "aren't worth the paper they're printed on, ma'am." Karen's smile cracked. "We're within our rights." "Not on land you don't govern," he said mildly. "Ma'am, if you'd like to test that theory, I can escort you to the station and continue the debate there. Otherwise, I suggest you leave this property now." He handed the papers back. The 2 clipboard men looked at the gravel like it might tell them what to do. Karen's jaw clicked. "This is far from over, Hayle," she snapped. She then hopped into the Escalade as it fishtailed a little as she barreled back down my driveway, the dust pluming up behind her like a bad omen trying too hard. "Thanks, Kyle," I said. "Post kept," he said, nodding at my signs. "You call me if they even breathe at your fence." 2 days later, in the middle of a lesson with Claire Mendez and her gelding Topaz, I heard a sound I didn't like. An insect hum turned mean. A drone skimmed outside the kitchen window. It then scooted toward the indoor arena and hovered at the doorway like it was deciding whether to be brave. I pulled out my phone and hit record. As it banked, the letters on its belly flashed. Vista Hills HOA. It zipped straight at Claire and hung 2 feet above her head. Topaz went from being attentive to terrified in a heartbeat. He bolted forward in a burst of speed and stopped short at the oxer, and dumped Claire into the jump with a cracking of poles as she hit the ground. "Hold!" I called, running. Claire was winded but whole. Rage steadied my hand. I picked up a loose metal pole cup and threw it. The drone stuttered, clipped a rail, and blew apart, hitting the ground like a bad idea finally getting its consequence. Rhonda caught Topaz, murmuring nonsense that always made horses think it was poetry, and walked him off while I stuffed the drone pieces into a feed bag and tied it shut. "Enough is enough," I said, not loudly, but the barn heard me. Claire brushed herself off as she and I made our way back to the house. I kept the feed bag dangling from my fingers like a dead rat, the last few plastic propellers clicking against each other with every step. Claire rubbed her elbow where she'd hit the ground, still muttering about that damn HOA under her breath. By the time we reached the porch, my adrenaline had already curdled into something heavier resolve, anger, and that familiar ache that came from realizing the place I loved was under siege yet again. Inside, Rhonda joined us long enough to give a quick update on Topaz. Just a little stiff, nothing more before she headed back to finish turnout checks. I set the ruined drone on the kitchen table. I looked at the drone's underside, with the words printed in large red block letters, "Property of Vista Hills HOA." Its cracked lens staring up at me like an accusation. The memory card was still inside. Good. Ted would want that. He'd want every scrap of evidence we could get our hands on. I wiped my palms on my jeans, poured Claire a glass of water, and made myself focus. because this wasn't going away. Not after today. Not after seeing that drone dip so low over my rider that it could have taken her eye out. Not after it sent Topaz sideways and nearly sent Claire to the ER. This was targeted. This was deliberate. And it was escalating. So, while the sun slipped lower over the paddocks and the barn lights flicked on one by one, I sat down with that feed bag full of shattered plastic and wrote the day's events out exactly as they happened. Time, direction, altitude, every erratic move that cursed drone made. Ted would need it. And if Karen wanted a war, then fine. She finally had my attention. A week later, Ted spent his time dissecting every file he'd pulled, building the bones of what he called a prosecution in waiting. I didn't realize how much evidence we already had until he laid it out across my kitchen table. Copies of the forged annexation form, timestamps from the feed deliveries that never arrived, photos of the tampered breaker box, and screenshots of HOA minutes authorizing funds they swore didn't exist. "This isn't a dispute anymore," he said. "It's illegal intimidation under a different banner." That's when I called Marla. We'd met in college. She'd gone one way, into law, and I'd gone the other, into horses. Different arenas, same grit. She answered on the second ring, heard my voice, and said, "Who do I have to sue?" When she arrived 2 days later, she didn't waste time on sympathy. She read through Ted's notes, the fake signature, the HOA filings, and exhaled through her nose. "Okay," she said. "Then we go on record." Oh, that evening, when the heat finally bled out of the day, Marla and I sat on the porch swing while Ted eased into the rocking chair beside us. Crickets stitched the pasture edges together. The boards creaked like an old friend clearing its throat. Marla kept her pen moving, while Ted slid a thin stack of printouts across my lap. 2 LLC names stared back at me. Blackwater Development Holdings, LLC, and Ridgeview Landscaping and Fencing LLC shells, with cheerful suburban branding that meant nothing until you followed the money. 12 years, Ted said quietly. 12 years of transfers bled straight out of HOA assessments and funneled into these two. Blackwater Development buys the properties, always the same pattern. Elderly owners, people living alone, anyone with no means to fight back. Then they flip those same lots through Ridgeview Landscaping and Fencing for full market value. Every sale happens fast. Too fast. He tapped the page. Karen signs off on every outgoing assessment and every mandatory improvement expense tied to these companies. She's not sloppy, she's bold. Marla's pen paused mid-sentence. "Who's the operator on Blackwater Development, LLC? Owner of record, Brian McQuaid. On paper, Blackwater Development looks clean. In practice, it smells like horse shit." "McQuaid," I said, tasting the name. Ted replied, "Ex-con, and before that, licensed realtor. Emphasis on the past tense. He's barred from real estate permanently. Fraud, coercion, forged signatures. He earned the resume. He's Karen's brother-in-law and her fixer. He's the one who tracks the vulnerable properties, pushes the liens, shoves the paperwork. By the time the owners realize what's happening, they've agreed to sell what they never intended to sell." Marla nodded slowly. "And Ridgeview?" "That's where all the profits go into," Ted said. "Every above-market sale, every flipped parcel, every fraudulent community procurement reimbursement. Pure laundering. They split it, Karen, Brian, and..." He flipped the final sheet around. "Margaret Livingston, Karen's mother. Also barred from real estate and sitting in power of any seat or title on any HOA boards for life. She's also an ex-con. A lot of this started with her before Karen even took the wheel." The porch swing swayed under me, not the chain. My pulse. "So Karen didn't invent the scheme," I said. "She inherited it." "She inherited it all right," Ted confirmed. "And she also perfected it too." I stared at the cheerful little LLC names until they blurred. "That's not annexation," I said. "That's property theft wearing a name tag." Oh, and Charlie? Ted paused. This isn't new. 20 years ago, I worked a case with your dad, Hickory Ridge HOA. Margaret Livingston Karen's mother ran the board. Same tactics, same map lines. We put her away. Karen knows exactly who we are. And that, Marla said, tapping the corner of the printout, is the beginning of a racketeering pattern, if it keeps going the way it is currently. We don't allege it yet. We document everything. Then when she crosses the line on record, we file. Not before. The night breeze lifted the edges of the papers on my lap, feeling like the universe whispering, "Pay attention." Because from that moment on, everything shifted another inch toward the inevitable. Ted documented. Marla drafted. I filed. And Karen, without realizing it, kept handing us more ammunition every single day. The offensive had begun, quietly and legally, the way real wars start when the other side still thinks they're winning. The first formal move wasn't loud. It was paper. In the doorway, Rhonda had paused, one hand on her cup of tea, listening without meaning to. "She's trying to bury you," she said softly after I took the papers off my lap. "I don't like this, Charlie. Not one little bit." "Ah," I said, forcing a smile I wasn't entirely sure of. "But she has no idea what's coming, and it's going to bury her instead." Rhonda frowned. "Cornered people do stupid things." "I know," I said. "I'm planning for stupid." Day by day, the ranch kept its rhythm. Kids learned to post. Teenagers stumbled into perfect distances and squealed like the world had just decided to be fair. Guardian patrolled the aisle. Brooke set poles in quiet diamonds of color that made nervous riders breathe easier. From the house, the lake shone the same as always, as if it didn't know someone had circled it on a developer's map and written amenity in a neat, hungry hand. The next week, the harassment shifted from paper to plumbing. The power flickered and died, for unpaid HOA dues, announced a utility operator who'd suddenly decided Vista Hills was the county seat. 3 days later, the water sputtered and stopped, for non-compliance and unpaid fines. I locked the meter, installed more cameras, and hauled buckets like a pioneer with a modern to-do list. The horses ate and drank before I did. That's the rule here. At night, alone in the tack room with the smell of leather soap and dust and old victories, I felt my father leaning on the doorframe the way he used to. "The land has a pulse," he'd say. "If you stand still long enough, you'll feel it through your boots." Just to be sure, I added another lock to the grain room, checked the camera angles twice, and tried to sleep. The air in my bedroom smelled like cut hay and a memory I couldn't place. The cottonwoods tapped the siding like a code I should have known how to read. Before dawn, I woke to Guardian's low woof at the window, the sound he makes when something is almost, but not yet, a threat. I swung my legs out of bed and thought, fight fair, but fight. The day would answer back. I stood still. The pulse was there, steady, stubborn. But there was a second beat, too, off to the side, like footsteps in grass. Plodding makes a sound if you learn how to hear it. Then came a night when the water tasted wrong and I spat it into the sink. I told myself it was nerves and would order tests the next day, because fear doesn't get a vote here, but it also doesn't get ignored. The lights flickered again that night. For a second, the whole barn felt like it had forgotten how to breathe. The next day, Marla drafted a cease and desist that read less like a letter and more like a loaded weapon in legal format. No threats, no theatrics, just statute, violation, consequence. She worded it the way good attorneys do, not asking for compliance, but documenting that they had been warned. "We aren't sending it yet," she said, sliding it aside. "We hold until she commits another act. Then this becomes Exhibit A," Ted agreed. "You don't fire before they step into the line of fire on record." Meanwhile, Karen continued operating like she was untouchable. The Vista Hills forum lit up again with threads about Cedar Creek's coming transition and unlicensed activity pending enforcement. She wasn't just spreading lies. She was setting public expectations so that when she made her move, people would accept it as inevitable. That is exactly the kind of arrogance you want in writing. While she was busy narrating her victory, Ted was already scraping metadata, archiving every post, and tracing which board members were reposting and boosting the smear campaign. One of them, a treasurer named Eleanor, reposted the claim that the owner has agreed to annex terms. Perfect. That was documented defamation with demonstrable harm. "Let her keep talking," Marla said. Every word is a nail in the lid, and Karen, still convinced she was on the offensive, had no idea she had already entered discovery without knowing it. Pressure always reveals the weak link first. And it wasn't Karen. It was the people standing behind her. The first crack appeared when a board member named Victor, someone who had been parroting her narrative online, quietly deleted every post he had made about the annexation. No apology, no correction, just an erasure attempt. Ted caught it within hours. He had already archived the originals. "Somebody realized they're exposed," he said. "That means they know it's illegal." A day later, the treasurer, Eleanor, stopped reposting Karen's claims altogether. No public reversal, just sudden silence. Silence in a campaign is louder than an announcement. It means someone received information they didn't want to put in writing. And still, Karen kept marching forward like the downfall couldn't possibly include her. That's the difference between confidence and delusion. Confidence has an exit plan. Delusion assumes immunity. Then came the trigger that Marla had been waiting for. Vista Hills circulated a printed HOA compliance notification, not through residents, but by hand-delivering copies to people on my property. They slipped them under windshield wipers of cars in my parking area, implying that Cedar Creek was entering regulatory transition, and clients should expect upcoming changes in operations and fees. They didn't mail it. They trespassed to deliver it. Marla took one look and said, "That's it, we file." Because the moment they stepped onto my land to distribute fraudulent notices, the harassment crossed from narrative to criminal interference. And that changed the battlefield entirely. Marla didn't mail the cease and desist. She had it hand-served to the Vista Hills board. Not emailed, not discussed. Served, with acknowledgement signatures they couldn't dispute later. The look on Karen's face when she opened the document would have been art if I'd had a camera. The letter was short, less than 2 pages, but every sentence was a blade. Forgery of annexation documents, criminal offense. A misappropriation of HOA funds, prosecutable. Defamation with financial harm, actionable. E-trespass and interference, documented and escalating. And the last line was the kind lawyers use when they want to freeze the blood of a bully. "You are hereby placed on notice that further action will result in immediate legal and criminal filing without additional warning." There was no invitation to negotiate, no compromise language, no please respond. Karen didn't show up at my gate after that, which told me she had finally understood one thing. She wasn't the only one writing on paper anymore. But the rest of the board reacted exactly the way cornered co-conspirators do. They tried to distance themselves. Victor emailed Marla privately within 24 hours, claiming he was not fully informed and did not authorize Karen's actions. Eleanor attempted the same approach, insisting she had no knowledge of forgery and that her reposts were in good faith. Both statements were desperate, inconsistent, and, most importantly, preserved as exhibits. "They're not defending the act," Ted said, reviewing the emails. "They're abandoning the actor. That means they expect fallout. And people only expect fallout when they know they're guilty. Cornered people don't retreat, they thrash." And Karen thrashed exactly as expected. The day after the notice was served, the smear campaign doubled. Multiple new posts appeared on the Vista Hills forum within hours. This time, anonymous accounts instead of board identities. The language changed, too. It wasn't transition anymore. It was attack. Cedar Creek is under investigation. The owner is being sued for violations. The facility may be forced to close. Parents should pull their children now for safety concerns. It was pure fabrication, but fabrication with intent. Not influence, sabotage. Then came the printed pamphlets. Not digital, printed, folded, distributed, left on windshields again. But this time not just at my farm. Ted found them on cars parked near the feed store and tacked to a community bulletin board in town. That meant she had escalated beyond HOA borders. She was targeting reputation in public commerce spaces. Anonymous accounts appeared. Flyers hit windshields in town. Pamphlets tacked to the feed store bulletin board. Brooke filed every cancellation email under damages. Old Mr. Dalton slid a flyer across the counter like a dead animal. I don't believe it, but others will. Ted watched forum timestamps. They've exhausted narrative. Next phase is impact. Good, Marla said without flinching. That turns this from private slander to public defamation. Bigger exposure means bigger damages. Karen believed she was tightening the noose. What she was actually doing was increasing the eventual payout. But there was a more important shift, one I didn't see immediately. The smear campaign wasn't designed to convince me. It was designed to starve me, to shrink my client base and drain my operating income so I couldn't afford to fight. That is not harassment. That is economic warfare. And economic warfare always precedes physical escalation. We were reaching the point where words would stop being their weapon. The next phase would not be subtle. Ted saw the turn before I did. He watched the pattern the way a firefighter watches wind direction. They've exhausted narrative, he said. When stories stop working, people like this switch to impact. You need to prep for the phase where they stop trying to ruin your reputation and start trying to ruin your operation. He wasn't talking about letters anymore. He meant property, equipment, animals, infrastructure. The kind of escalation that leaves proof, not whispers. Marla agreed, but her focus was legal positioning, not prediction. Let them step over the line, she said. Once they do, we don't argue. We prosecute. Then came the trigger Marla had been waiting for. Vista Hills hand-delivered HOA compliance notifications on my land. That crossed the line from narrative to criminal interference. Marla didn't email the cease and desist. She had it hand-served. Karen didn't show up after that, which told me she finally understood she wasn't the only one writing on paper anymore. But I understood what Ted was warning. Prosecution only matters after the damage is done. So while Marla built the litigation front, Ted built the prevention plan, cameras, documentation protocols, and witness statements from staff now willing to speak on record. Then something happened that confirmed Ted's timeline. Karen disappeared. No posts, no sightings, no gate confrontations, no statements. Silence from someone who thrives on control is not peace. It is loading. Ted caught the shift instantly. She's not done, he said. She's repositioning. It seems silence from someone like her never lasts long. It just mutates. 3 mornings later, her SUV rolled up again. This time with her counsel and her personal goon in a too-tight polo, mirrored sunglasses, and posture that screamed backyard alpha energy. His so-called uniform looked less security detail and more like a Halloween costume Panic bought at Walmart on clearance night. They tried legal posturing, intimidation, ego theatrics. All of it fell flat. Then Karen pivoted back and rested a hand on my gate. Unpaid fines and refusal to comply will result in a heap of trouble you'll never see coming. She didn't just posture at my gate that afternoon. She produced a clipboard annexation application on top, membership form beneath, a cheap pen clipped like a threat. Sign and we'll reduce or even erase your fines, she said. But you keep up this defiance game, and we will be issuing you fines of $250 per day until you comply with HOA regulations and standards. The goon shifted his weight like punctuation. Her counsel cleared his throat without quite making eye contact. I didn't touch the pen. You don't have any control or jurisdiction on my land, just FYI. This ranch is miles outside your boundaries. You don't have my consent. Not now, not ever. Karen smiled the way people do when they think their bluff is a bulldozer. Refusal can and will result in a lien on your property and forcible foreclosure. File a fraudulent lien, I said evenly, and you'll add criminal exposure to your ledger. Now get off my land. I didn't blink. File fraudulent annexation forms with my signature that I never signed, and you'll be facing criminal charges on top of everything else. Karen just glared at me, as if a mere thought would make me do whatever she wanted. Just sign the damned membership forms, she snapped, waving it like a holy text. Or, so help me God, I will. Find a way to run you off this God-forsaken hick farm. You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with. I ripped the form down the middle and tossed it back. Yeah, I do. The same low-life, bottom-feeding bully we beat once already. Her goon puffed up. Her attorney paled. They retreated, rattled, and rattled bullies don't quit, they double down. Marla prepared litigation. Ted strengthened defenses. Cameras extended to the east tree line. Frank from next door checked fence lines from his quad. Motion light here, he said. Doesn't stop anyone, but it makes them think twice. And Sophie, my Westphalian thoroughbred, stood in her stall like a sentinel, ears forward, breath slow, aware, not afraid, reading the dark with the calm focus of an athlete waiting for a gate to drop. Horses don't lie, and villains don't go silent when they give up. They go silent when they're about to escalate. By late week, Frank found the first flag. Plastic neon flapping smugly from a thin stake driven into soil it had no right to claim. He killed the quad and waved me and Ted over. Ted took photos, each frame with GPS stamped in the corner. They're walking the line, Frank said, nudging another stake with his boot. Only it's not their line. We traced the run past my north paddock into Grayson's east triangle, his sea of ryegrass cut clean as a crew cut. 2 more flags there, bold as graffiti. They're bracketing both properties to make annex look inevitable, Ted said. You don't pound stakes on a hope. You do it to sell a story later. Frank plucked the nearest flag, rolled it into his fist. Story's changing. Motion lights go up tonight. That was the moment I felt the temperature in the story drop. Because villains don't go quiet when they quit. They go quiet when they're about to escalate. The next move would not be made with paper or rumors. Night arrived with the kind of hush that makes you believe in mercy. It didn't last. Headlights slid across the front pasture like a blade. Tires on gravel. The clack of a gate latch. Guardian was already moving black shape, cutting between the house and the yard light. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. Sacred animals don't warn. They stand. He planted between me and the glare, and he growled once low, old world, a sound that remembers wolves. The first shot cracked the night in half. Time went thin and bright. Guardian folded, then fought to stand, then folded again. I was on my knees before I remembered how I'd moved. My hand found his ruff, warm turned to wet. Plate! Ted shouted from the porch. The second round smacked wood on the post behind me. Splinters kissed my cheek. Frank was already moving boots on dirt, while a black SUV fishtailed, red taillights fanning dust like blood in water. I've got it, Ted said, voice flat as a murder book. Sheriff Whitmore now. Rhonda was already dialing. The door slammed. Brooke's flashlight jittered over Guardian's flank. Stay with me, old boy, Brooke choked, pressing gauze. Guardian's chest hitched. He licked my wrist like an oath. I looked at the lane. The taillights gone. The night filling back in around the hole the shooter torn in it. And nothing in me was soft anymore. She wants a fight. I heard my voice, but it sounded like my father's. Then she's got one. By dawn, the yard was strung with blue and red. Sheriff Whitmore walked the lane with a flashlight and a jaw set to granite. Evidence bags, photos, statements, paperwork that doesn't blink. Guardian lived. We wrapped him and loaded him, and I pressed my forehead to his, promising things you only promise when you've run out of ways to be gentle. 4 days later, when the false calm finally came, it didn't bring peace. It brought the next blow.